Excitement is currently building to fever pitch in the UK as we eagerly await the imminent opening of Hyperia, the tallest roller coaster ever built in the country, and the tallest roller coaster ever made by manufacturer Mack Rides. Hyperia will be the third unique hypercoaster design that Mack have built, with previous coasters being made in China and Australia. Luckily for me though, the Chinese hypercoaster design was copied and built slightly closer to home in a park in Turkey called Land of Legends, where it was given the rather generic name of Hypercoaster. I've been desperate to get my fix of riding a Mack Hyper, and with China and Australia being a bit far away, I jumped on a plane and headed to Turkey to give myself an early preview of what Hyperia could be like, and thankfully, it didn't disappoint. Let's break down the ride's layout. Hyperia starts with a lift hill that reaches a maximum height of 200.2 feet. The drop starts with a short straight section before it turns rapidly to the left as the train descends. You then pull up into a full 360-degree vertical loop. After pulling out of this gargantuan inversion, you climb up a huge airtime hill before diving down and pulling up into a left-banked airtime hill. The airtime doesn't stop there though, as you're sent into yet another large hill before you dive down and pull up into the ride's turnaround section. This curved bank turn rises up and down before there's a break from the airtime hills, with the next element being a fast 0G roll. This then transitions into a twisted airtime hill, similar to what you get on Intamin Hypers. There's one last airtime hill to enjoy before the ride's finale, where you enter a right-handed helix that merges into a quick chicane before you're sent into a small overbanked right-hand turn that leads to a small jump into the brake run. As you can probably tell, it's a pretty airtime heavy ride. Before riding this, I'd experienced hypercoasters built by Intamin, B&M, Morgan, Arrow and Togo, and each manufacturer's designs all feel a bit different. This being my first Mack Hyper, again it felt different from the others, almost like a cross between the strong airtime and transitions you get on an Intamin, and the large floaty elements you get in the B&M. It definitely felt modern, and I really enjoyed the ride. It was quite refreshing to find another manufacturer's hypercoaster still managed to feel different from the rest. I absolutely loved how much airtime there was in this ride, and most of it was of the ejector variety. It wasn't the strongest airtime I'd experienced, and I'd say most Intamin coasters deliver stronger negative G, but most of the airtime was still stronger than the floaty hills you get on B&Ms, and it was all great fun. The first drop, however, was actually a little disappointing, as it lacked the airtime I expected from a 200-foot coaster. Because it has to turn more than 180 degrees, the track twists and begins to pull out quite early in the drop. You end up getting a little bit of air, then twisting and transitioning into sustained positive G after the track is flipped. This is the same whether you're in the front or the back, although I think I actually preferred this drop in the front, as it felt like a more natural transition. Coming out of the drop, you enter the largest vertical loop in the world, which is an impressive record. I had thought that Full Throttle at Six Flags Magic Mountain had a larger loop, but it turns out this is the joint record holder along with its clone Flash. Pulling out of the first drop, you go straight into this element, so there's a long period of sustained positive G at the start of the ride. If the train is heavy and running fast, this can cause a little bit of grey out going into the loop, and I found that it was interesting that the forces at the top of the loop varied from 0G floater air all the way to negative G hang time, and it all seemed to depend on just how heavy the train was. When I visited the park, it was on a very quiet day in early April, so most of the trains I were on were only partially filled. Those that had a bit more people on board did seem to make everything a little bit better though, and all the forces got a bit stronger as the train went faster. This doesn't just go for the big loop, but also for all the airtime hills, as I found that the airtime was a little bit weak when the train was very light, but it got stronger the more people that were riding. One element that surprised me with how good it was, regardless of how heavy the train may be, was the 0G roll, which consistently delivered a fast, high-speed twist that I loved. It almost reminded me of some of the crazy 0G rolls you used to get on old-school B&M coasters like Dragon Can, where the rate of rotation causes ejector air, rather than the floater you expect in this kind of inversion. Whilst the 0G roll wasn't quite as extreme as those classic coasters, it certainly packed a punch and served as a great way to mix things up from the rest of the layout, which was mostly consisting of airtime hills. The ending of the ride worked well for me too, as just when the train is slowing down, you enter a low to the ground helix followed by a fast chicane, sort of like what you get on Silver Star. Staying close to the ground at the end of the ride helps to really add to that speed sensation and keep up the thrills all the way to the end. There was one slight detractor here though, as the banked hill right before the brake run actually felt a little bit rough. The rest of the coaster is super smooth, even after it's been running pretty much 24/7 since it opened 6 years ago, but there's quite a noticeable jolt and rattle on this section of track. It's not enough to detract from the ride overall, but maybe it was a section that didn't quite line up when they were putting the coaster together. Hypercoaster has some, shall we say, interesting theming. The ride entrance is actually hidden inside a gift shop, although it does have quite a nice sign below its loop. As you walk to the station, there's an impressively large steam train, along with some quite random and quite janky animatronics. These elements kinda feel a bit like the lazy theming elements you plonk down in a game like Planet Coaster or Roller Coaster Tycoon, where you'll scatter some random props around just to bump up a ride's rating, as there doesn't really seem to be anything linking the ride itself to the theming. There's a couple more steam engine designs within the station itself, but there doesn't really seem to link back to the Hypercoaster name or anything else about it, and the area around the track and the train itself are completely unthemed. One thing that did make me smile though was by the entrance there's a sign which claims equal thrills no matter what seat you're in, and I have to say that that's a lie. I mentioned earlier that I preferred the first drop in the front seats, and that's the same for the rest of the ride. The back was good fun, don't get me wrong, and the G-force during the loop was probably a little bit stronger there, but overall I think this ride is better experienced in the front row, as the drop is better, the sensation of speed is better, and the airtime is just as good over the giant hills. So overall, I rather enjoyed Hypercoaster. Its name might be a bit too generic and kinda sucks, but as I've said before, a coaster by any other name would ride as sweet, and this is a very sweet ride. It's simply great fun, as a satisfying amount of airtime and good variety of inversions as well. It's a great overall package and a fantastic coaster. So what does this mean for the upcoming Mack Hyper Coaster in the UK, Hyperia? Well, honestly, I've got some concerns that it may not live up to the hype and people could be a little disappointed. The first drop in particular might not deliver the airtime that people are hoping for. As I mentioned before, the rate of twist and early pull-out from Hypercoaster's drop means that there really isn't that much airtime in it at all. I had the pleasure to watch a couple of test runs on Hyperia earlier this week, and it's possible that that might be the case on this coaster as well. Going over the top, you should have a good bit of force pushing you forwards, and giving you air as you drop, but as soon as the track twists 180 degrees, that force will be pushing you into your seat rather than lifting you out of it, or letting you freefall. It does appear that the twist may be later in the drop on Hyperia than on Hypercoaster, but I guess time will tell just how good this drop will be and what sort of airtime it will deliver. The other concern I have for Hyperia is its length. Hypercoaster is 4,176 feet long, and that length feels quite satisfying by the time you reach the end, and it feels like a complete experience. Hyperia on the other hand is only 3,265 feet, nearly 1,000 feet shorter, and it's got a higher top speed as well, so that track length will be transversed much quicker. Will the shorter length still deliver an overall satisfying ride? I'm not sure, but I'm still keen to find out. From what I've seen, the elements that make Hyperia do look great, and each one should be fun, and I can't wait to experience them. But it still does seem rather short for a hypercoaster of its size, about 15,000 feet shorter than Hyperion, 2,000 feet shorter than Shambhala, and nearly 2,500 feet shorter than the big one. It does have some unique elements, and I'm sure they will be good, and it'll be a good coaster, but I can't quite shake the feeling that the design brief for it had been focused on beating the UK record for as little expenditure as possible, which has resulted in a coaster just 1 foot taller than the big one's claimed height, and a ride that's significantly shorter than any other hypercoaster. Let me know in the comments what you think of this coaster, and what it means for Hyperia. I'm planning on being at Thorpe Park for Hyperia's opening day and intend to do a full review of it afterwards, so if you haven't already then make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. I've been Rollercoaster David, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video very soon.